This wasn't a random event. This was a targeted assassination.
A brutal killing.
There was a large amount of blood.
Numerous bullet wounds to his torso and head.
He was probably dead before he hit the floor.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
I was concerned about her description of the shooter being very cliche-ish, almost like a TV movie.
He's a con man. He goes by different names. So red flags are popping up all over the place.
Risky business deals with shady operators. He inevitably got himself, in plain English, in over his head.
The truth will be revealed.
What this came down to was greed. Every one of them was convinced that these two were somehow involved.
I've been a homicide detective for a long time, and oftentimes you just try to find the lie.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Spokane, Washington, an idyllic town nestled in the lush green mountains of the Pacific Northwest.
Spokane is a city of approximately 300,000 people. It's surrounded by mountains and farm country. Beautiful, with a river running right through the middle of town. It is a great place to raise a family and make a life.
We don't have a lot of crime. We aren't like the big cities where we're going out on homicides every night.
But on a quiet December night, the peace of this town is shattered by gunshots.
911, what's your emergency?
Somebody shot my husband. Oh God, he's going to find me.
At 7:03 p.m., Alberta Carlile called 911 reporting that someone had just shot her husband, Doug. Alberta, when she called in, it was right after she made it to a closet, locked herself in, and was hiding. And she called immediately. She had her phone with her. So we knew that this had happened within a minute or two of the call.
Officers arrived on scene. Medics came in and immediately began working on him. They pronounced him dead at 7:18 in the evening.
The victim is Doug Carlile, a 63-year-old businessman, devoted husband, and father of 6.
Douglas, he was a family man. He'd been married to his wife, Alberta, for 42 years. This was the love of her life. She knew everything that he did. They were always together. I got the impression that this had broken her. They had grown children, very religious family. From all outward appearances, a completely normal person. He wasn't a criminal, he wasn't causing trouble.
He had his own excavation business in Washington and had expanded that business to include the oil trucking business and was attempting to get into the oil drilling business.
Within minutes of the 911 call, homicide detectives are on the scene.
It was a very affluent neighborhood, and this was one of the larger houses in the neighborhood. I was surprised when I was told the address of where the homicide had occurred, because typically we might go 20 or 30 years without having a homicide in those type of neighborhoods in Spokane.
Tasked with investigating the murder of Doug Carlile are veteran homicide detectives Mark Burnbridge and Brian Sesnick.
When I first entered the home, there was Christmas stuff all over. There was actually Christmas music playing over the stereo the entire time I was processing the crime scene. So it was decorated, and they were obviously ready for the holidays. The deceased, Mr. Carlile, was lying on his back, his arms out to the side. One round had gone in his mouth.
Doug had numerous bullet wounds to his torso and head.
There was a large amount of blood. It was obvious that the wounds had been fatal almost immediately. He was probably dead before he hit the floor.
Detectives begin processing the crime scene, looking for clues.
Initially, there wasn't a lot of evidence. I found 7 shell casings. Douglas Carlile was shot 7 times. He was hit 7 times. 5 of the bullets exited him, so I found 5 bullets in the house. 2 more were recovered at the autopsy.
The .45 caliber handgun had been fired at Mr. Carlile. The subject had emptied the handgun. He had almost no chance to survive those wounds for any period of time. This was a directed attack, and they fired it to make sure he was dead.
To track down the killer, detectives must now focus on the last 24 hours of Doug Carlile's life, beginning with the moment he arrived home at 6:55 p.m.
Alberta told me that she and Doug had gone to church that evening and had just arrived home from church. She removed their hidden key, which she used to enter the house. She put the key back in position, walked through the kitchen to a short hallway which leads to the upstairs. She was just getting to the 2nd floor when she heard voices downstairs. She heard 2 males talking in the kitchen, and she knew one of them was Doug, and she just assumed that one of them was one of her 4 sons. And so she came back downstairs to see who was at the house. She came to the bottom of the stairs and stepped to the entryway to the kitchen, and she could see Doug to her left, standing there with his hands in front of him, telling somebody, "You don't have to do this." She looked to her right, and near the kitchen table was what she described as a large male dressed all in black with a black stocking mask on with a hole in it. She could see the subject's eyes and nose and part of their mouth, and that they were holding a large handgun. Alberta said that they also had something on their chest and back, like a backpack or a shoulder holster, and that she turned around and started running. As she was running up the stairs, she heard a lot of gunshots. She didn't know the number. And that she ran upstairs and hid in one of the closets on the 2nd floor. Alberta had her cell phone with her and called 911 from a closet she was hiding in and directed police to their location.
Detectives theorized that Doug's murder could have been a burglary gone wrong.
I examined all the doors, all the windows, took photographs. There was a spare key to the house that Alberta talked about. I found that it was still in the same location it had been. So there was nothing to indicate that anyone had broken into the house at all.
I could find no sign that anything had been stolen or disturbed in the residence.
Douglas Carlile still had his wallet. He had cash on him, so it wasn't a robbery. I contacted a canine officer, and he showed me the path that his dog had tracked. Basically, it showed that the suspect had fled the back door of the residence, through some shrubs, over a small fence, and through the neighbor's backyard. It was cool out, but not frozen. There was some water in the neighbor's backyard, and you could see footprints in the mud.
A canine unit serves a very valuable purpose at any homicide scene when you have either property or a person that needs to be tracked from that scene. It's sort of the most versatile animal you can imagine. So they have speed and strength, but also the olfactory or the sense of smell that will lead them to items far more effectively and more quickly than a person just looking around.
Just beyond the neighbor's backyard was a field where we located a glove. It was a tan-colored welding glove. Normally that wouldn't be a big deal, but there was some dew on the ground and leaves had fallen, and this appeared to be sitting on top of everything and was dry. So right away we thought this may have been dropped by our suspect as he fled the scene. It was strange enough that there was no way we were going to leave it.
At a minimum, I was hoping to get a DNA sample from the glove that went to the shooter or someone that was at the scene who has been arrested before, so that I can identify them by name. Our canine was able to track the suspect past a school. We were later able to get the video from the external cameras on that school, and we could see a grainy figure running down the street just a minute or so after the shooting, leading off into the darkness toward the hidden trail. This camera was not a low-light camera, and so the footage just shows a grainy image of this individual running by. You can't identify him or tell race in any way. After looking at the getaway route, taking into account the hedges, the hidden gate, and the kind of hidden trail that the shooter took to get away from the scene, I told Detective Sesnick that I believed this was a directed attack, specifically targeting Doug Carlile, and I was very concerned.
This wasn't a random event. This was a targeted assassination.
Detectives now consider whether this could have been an inside job.
Family members or people you know kill you more often than a random, unknown person. And so I had to eliminate the family first.
When you have a murder, the first person you're going to look at is the spouse. And in this case, we had a spouse who was not only at the murder scene, but claimed to have seen the suspect. But the suspect didn't go after her. So that drew a lot of red flags for me. I was thinking, is this someone who's trying to pull something over my eyes, or is she really the loving wife?
Alberta provided a fairly detailed description of the shooter's clothing and the mask and some kind of gear that they had on their chest and back. I was concerned about her description of the shooter being very cliche-ish, almost like a TV movie, and it concerned me that it was being made up.
A story that is too detailed is inherently suspicious. Even if she didn't pull the trigger herself, could she have either hired or convinced someone to do her dirty work for her?
In the brutal murder of 63-year-old business and family man Doug Carlile, suspicion is swirling around his wife, Alberta.
My first interview with Alberta Carlile occurred at approximately 8:30 in the evening to 9 o'clock in the evening. The shooting had occurred around 6:30.
Alberta Carlile, she is different. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that when you're talking with her, there's a lot of religion that comes out. She would occasionally break down crying, and she'd want to pray and things like that. She's very emotional, and that comes across like she's faking it.
So Alberta's reaction in her interview to revert to prayer and sort of these soliloquies and speaking to herself and to God is obviously suspicious and piques the curiosity of investigators. This could mean one of two things. This is a stress response where she's seeking some kind of solace through prayer, or it's a convenient tactic of avoidance and deflection.
As a homicide detective, I've interviewed a lot of people who have had loved ones die from a murder. I've seen the whole gamut of emotion from that, from very stoic, almost non-emotion to hysterical crying. I try not to read a lot into that, but some of the things that Alberta said and some of her actions concerned me greatly. She didn't care about us processing the scene or getting evidence. Saying goodbye to Doug was more important to her than us catching the killer.
Detectives question potential motives that Alberta would have to want her husband dead.
She began talking about their finances and that a lot of what I had seen was just for show. They didn't have $40 in the bank. They didn't have any life insurance. They didn't have medical insurance. I'd had a chance to go through his phone. There wasn't another woman on the side. She didn't have anyone on the side. Basically, every text message and call was, "I love you," back and forth between them. And so once I ruled out that there was a financial incentive for her to be involved, I really believed her when she talked about how in love they were and how things were going between them.
Still grasping for a lead, detectives press Alberta to recall any details of the day of the murder that stand out as unusual.
Alberta started telling me that she thought she had seen a van earlier in the night up in the neighborhood.
One of the neighbors had called 911 a short time before the shooting, talking about a suspicious white van. About 5:45 in the afternoon, she had come home and noticed a white van parked in front of her house. It was in front of her driveway, and she immediately became concerned, thinking maybe someone had broken into her house. So instead of pulling into her home, she had driven around the block and noticed someone sitting in the driver's seat of the van. When this person noticed her watching, they drove off. A short time later, she looked out her window and the van was back, again parked in front of her house. So she called 911 to report a suspicious vehicle.
Was the mysterious white van connected to Doug's murder? Looking for answers, police canvassed the Carlile's neighborhood.
One of the homes had an external video system, and we actually had videotape footage of this suspicious van about 2 hours prior to the murder, driving through the neighborhood slowly. The van was unique in several ways in that it was an aftermarket extended van, and one of my detectives spent almost 2 weeks trying to identify specifically the make and model of that van. And in the state of Washington, we can run an all vehicles request. And so we requested all the vehicles in Spokane County and surrounding counties that match that van, and we came up with a list of 75.
Though detectives believe they may have images of the getaway vehicle, they're no closer to knowing the identity of the killer.
While I was talking with Alberta, obviously the big question in my mind is who would want your husband dead? And I asked her point blank, who are possible suspects? You've seen the person who shot him, who else could be involved in this? And the only name that she ever mentioned was James Henrikson.
Alberta told me that Doug was very afraid of James, who was one of his business partners, and that he had told her that if something happens to me, James did it.
An investor and project developer in the burgeoning oil sector, Doug Carlile had partnered with James Henrikson in a venture to extract oil in North Dakota.
James was a businessman in North Dakota. He owned a trucking company hauling water and oil out on the oil leases of North Dakota.
There's a lot of similarities between James and Doug. They both liked people to believe that they were rich. They both drove nice vehicles, had nice houses, liked to show it off, liked to pretend that they had a lot of money. And the fact is, neither of them did. Both were living well beyond their means.
Detectives reach out to the Carlile children, hoping they can shed more light on the relationship between Doug and James.
Every one of them was convinced that James was somehow involved in this murder, and that it had to do with the fact that their dad and James Henrikson were not getting along, and their business was going south.
Doug's eldest son reveals that the animosity between Doug and James had reached a fevered pitch in the days prior to his murder.
Doug and James Henrikson got into a verbal argument about the finances of the company. James Henrikson was demanding his investment back. It was a significant sum of money, over $400,000 they were arguing about, and Doug Carlile was refusing to pay him back that money. He was concerned enough for their father's well-being that they gave him a handgun that belonged to them so he could carry it for his safety. It is not uncommon for people that are potentially going to lose large sums of money based on either fraud, theft, or just bad business to resort to murder, either to recover their money or just to get even or pay the person back for costing them their money. In my experience, I've seen people kill people over $50. So hundreds of thousands of dollars is certainly something that someone might kill somebody over.
As the cliche goes, follow the money.
Detectives are zeroing in on a new suspect in the murder of family man Doug Carlile, his business partner, James Henrikson.
So early on, every family member is saying James Henrikson is involved in this. I just started Googling James Henrikson, and one of the first things that popped up was this ripoff report. He's a con man, he goes by different names. So red flags are popping up all over the place. And so, yeah, with his criminal history and everything that we knew about James at that point, that's when we decided we've got to try and talk to him.
I needed to find out his relationship with Doug Carlile and to see if anything that the Carlile family members had told me was potentially true. On the night of Doug's murder, after I had completed interviewing Alberta and her sons, they had provided to me contact information for James Henrikson to include his address and cell phone number. I contacted police radio and arranged for them to ping James Henrikson's cell phone so I could locate where that cell phone was prior to me trying to contact him. After about 20 minutes, I received a phone call from police radio who told me that that phone was being identified as being back in Watford, North Dakota. I contacted James Henrikson at home and spoke to him on the phone. I identified who I was and told him I was calling because Doug Carlile had been murdered. James Henrikson told me he was aware that Doug had been murdered because he had received texts from several people that he and Doug had in common as friends who were telling him that Doug had been murdered.
He denied having anything to do with the murder.
James Henrikson was guarded in his disclosures of information to me about Doug Carlile. I was asking him about how his business was doing, and he became angry and denied that there were any problems between he and Doug Carlile, and said it was Doug Carlile who lied to people and didn't pay his bills. I've been a homicide detective for a long time, and oftentimes you just try to find the lie that helps lead you down the correct path. And in this case, I either had the Carlile family that was lying or I had James Henrikson that was lying, and now I had to find evidence to bolster which side was telling the truth. While I was speaking with James on the phone, I wasn't comfortable that he was actually in North Dakota. In this day and age with cell phones, you can forward another cell phone to another cell phone or to a hard line at some residence. So he could have been in Spokane talking to me on a phone that was actually pinging off of a cell tower in North Dakota, and I wouldn't know that.
Cell phones are a really interesting investigative tool. The use of tower pings can essentially leave a trail of breadcrumbs confirming where a person has been or has gone. At the same time, a very calculating suspect could put a phone in a car, leave a phone on a subway, or send their phone with somebody else in order to lead investigators into a completely different area. In essence, a phone can be used to fabricate an alibi.
I later completed search warrants to get complete phone information from his phone, because if you get the actual background information, it will show whether that phone was being forwarded or not, or the actual physical location of that phone. And I was able to determine that it was not forwarded and was actually in North Dakota, 1,000 miles away from Doug's murder. That told me that he was not the murderer.
At that point, we didn't have any concrete evidence. We didn't have anything linking him to the scene.
Unable to put James at the crime scene, detectives ask him who might be angry enough to want Doug dead.
He told me that over the years, Doug, in his contracting business, had been sued a lot of times and had done a lot of shady deals, and there might be a lot of people that were mad at him that might be willing to hurt him.
Mr. Carlile had 31 liens against him. So there were a lot of people that were upset with him and that would have a reason to murder him.
Detectives dig deeper into Doug's business dealings and discover a desperate man hell-bent on success.
Doug borrowed $150,000 from his son Shane. Doug was promising investors 100% return on their money in 90 days or 6 months, depending on who the investor was, which was ridiculous.
Every dime that he had been invested in the business, and they were not bringing any money in. The business was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. There were IOUs outstanding. They'd taken loans from people up to $400,000 and promised repayment. Those had come past due, so people were upset wanting their money back. He was in dire financial straits.
He had contacted a middleman in the Middle East who was reportedly involved in finding investors for oil companies. This individual charged Mr. Carlile $90,000 for the right to apply for an investment loan. This was pure fraud, and this individual had no intent of conducting any true business with Mr. Carlile, so Mr. Carlile lost everybody's money again and didn't further this business.
Risky business deals with shady operators. Doug got himself, in plain English, in over his head.
I was going to have to expand the pool of possible suspects to everybody that was involved in lawsuits against him.
That leaves a very long list of potential suspects with very viable motives. Money is more than just dollars and cents. Money has a high degree of emotional attachment for people. It's tied to everything from self-esteem to status to identity. And when you begin tampering with that, people will, not surprisingly, respond emotionally, including through murder.
In the face of so many suspects, with the motive to want Doug Carlile dead, detectives reach out to the media looking for new leads.
I had put out a request in the media for persons that knew Doug Carlile or James Henrikson to contact us if they had had business dealings with them. Out of the blue, about a week after Doug's murder, an individual by the name of Robert Deleo contacted me at the police station and said that he'd had business dealings with both James Henrikson and Doug Carlile and was willing to speak with me.
Robert Deleo is a very smooth-talking guy, but he's a gang member. He'd been involved in a murder. He is involved in large quantities of drugs, and he'd been to prisons numerous times. He denied having anything to do with the murder. He denied that James had anything to do with the murder, but he felt that he needed to come in and let us know his relationship.
Suspicious of Deleo's motive for coming forward, investigators question him about his whereabouts when Doug Carlile was killed.
He told us he was in North Dakota at the time of the murder. We checked phone records, we checked GPS records, and we confirmed he was in North Dakota, which is what his girlfriend told us.
Mr. Deleo was insistent he knew nothing about the murders, and in fact, he took a polygraph the next day. And Mr. Deleo passed that polygraph.
Despite Deleo's alibi and polygraph, something just doesn't sit right with detectives.
I thought it was very odd that Mr. Deleo came forward just to provide information that he knew Doug Carlile or James Henrikson.
Psychologically speaking, I think there might be a number of reasons why somebody would want to insert themselves into an investigation. One reason might be, I want to get close to the investigation. I want to control it. I want to know what's going on.
We often see them show up, for instance, in volunteer search parties where a body hasn't been found. And they want to keep abreast of what's going on so that they can stay a step or two ahead.
Also times, people when they have a criminal history are sometimes impulsive. They don't necessarily have the best judgment, and sometimes they make decisions that are ill-advisable. Sometimes they do this because they're arrogant.
After Mr. Deleo left my interview room, I began working on a search warrant to include his cell phone, who they had been calling and texting, to try to create some kind of a connection between Mr. Deleo, Mr. Henrikson, and anybody that might be involved in this murder.
Investigators then make a shocking discovery: that James Henrikson shared a similar criminal past with Robert Deleo.
Robert Deleo was James Henrikson's right-hand man. They had worked out in the same gym together, and then a couple months later ended up in jail together, ended up being cellmates. While sitting in jail, Henrikson told Robert Deleo about his business ventures and his dreams of striking it rich in North Dakota, and told him, when you get out of jail, get a hold of me, I got a job for you.
But what was that job? Looking for answers, investigators do a deep dive into James Henrikson's partnership with Doug Carlile. They discover the business was in desperate need of a bailout from an angel investor.
Doug had developed this dream of being an oil man and owning an oil lease and oil wells without really understanding the full financial impact of what that meant. And he was trying to find partners to buy this oil lease for $2.1 million. Doug did not have that kind of money.
Luckily, Doug and James knew a contractor named Larry Tormazov with connections to big money.
Mr. Tormazov was personal friends with a gentleman in Moses Lake who was involved in the contracting business and who was very wealthy. Mr. Tormazov was then contacted by James Henrikson, where they discussed the possibility of this wealthy individual becoming involved in the oil lease. James Henrikson stood to make a lot of money if they could move the oil lease and the drilling of the well forward. And they were desperately running out of time to make that happen, or they were going to lose everything. And so he needed this wealthy individual to help fund this project.
There was just one problem.
Mr. Tormazov said that he told James Henrikson, under no uncertain terms would this person get involved as long as Doug Carlile was involved, because of his previous dealings with him. Mr. Tormazov told me that this made James Henrikson very angry.
Turns out, the only thing standing between James Henrikson and millions of dollars is Doug Carlile.
Money is always a motivation for murder. I mean, when the stakes get higher, sometimes the danger factor increases.
Money, they say, is the root of all evil. That may be a bit of an overstatement, but is it a common denominator in a majority of murders? Unfortunately, yes. When you have a trail of bad debts and damaged business relationships, greed is going to push to the top in Doug's case.
What investigators learn next cracks the case wide open.
Doug found an investor who lived in Texas, who had a lot of money, who was willing to invest in this land. He'd done the research, he knew that there was a lot of money in it. Doug had convinced this person that really they didn't need James, but he needed to be bought out because they were partners. And he'd agreed to do that. They were set to meet the following day in order to work out the finances to buy James out and to actually begin working on drilling oil wells.
Turns out Doug was murdered just days before he was set to cut James out of the business. If James had caught wind of the plan, he'd have even more motive to want Doug dead.
We're trying to piece everything together. Deleo had been in North Dakota since at least Thanksgiving. He hadn't been back to Spokane. We knew Henrikson had been in North Dakota consistently even longer than that. Neither of them had been to town recently, which again creates issues when these are your two suspects and you know that they haven't been anywhere near the murder.
This is now the second viable suspect that police have had to strike off their list. So now they are losing momentum. They've spun their wheels for a while now with these people. Where do you go next?
Police finally get a breakthrough when DNA is pulled from the glove found at the crime scene.
25 days after the murder, I received a phone call from the State Patrol Crime Lab and was told that they had a hit to an individual by the name of Tim Sukau.
When we first hear the name Timothy Sukau, I got very excited, but it was hampered a little bit by we'd never heard that name before. And it came off a glove that I found in a field. What if it's just a coincidence? What if Timothy Sukau is the next door neighbor? We didn't know who it was at that point.
I immediately began researching Timothy Sukau and found that he was a multi-time convicted felon of violent crimes, first-degree robberies, gun crimes, and that he lived in the Spokane area. I started looking for Timothy Sukau's connection to anybody associated with Doug Carlile because he didn't know Doug and didn't have a motive for killing him.
Knowing there's a small crime world in Spokane, detectives start piecing together a potential conspiracy to commit murder. Could Timothy Sukau have been hired to kill Doug Carlile?
Robert Deleo was also a true bad guy in Spokane. He comes across as very gregarious and friendly, but he's dangerous. And I wondered, his contacts in Spokane, did they have something to do with Doug's murder, and what was his real involvement with James Henrikson? I believed we had a true hitman case.
Investigators now theorize James Henrikson masterminded the murder of Doug Carlile by hiring Robert Deleo to contract out the job to local thug, Timothy Sukau.
Murder for hire schemes are fortunately fairly rare. Most people act impulsively and do their own dirty work. Whoever's concocted this murderous scheme simply doesn't want to get their hands dirty or wants to leave themselves an alibi. So you're essentially looking for an absolute stranger who committed the murder for some kind of payoff. The key to finding them in that case is to find the person who did have the motive and ideally linking them to the killer.
So the first thing we do is try and connect Timothy Sukau to James Henrikson and Robert Deleo, but he doesn't connect to any of them.
Detectives place Timothy Sukau on 24-hour undercover surveillance.
We began following Timothy Sukau around, trying to find out everything we can about him. We find out that he works for an asbestos removal company in the Spokane Valley. As we start looking at the company, we see some vans parked out front. One of them, which looks exactly like the van that had been described to us at the crime scene.
I checked our list of 75 vehicles that we received from the state of Washington as potential owners of those suspect vehicles, and that asbestos removal company was listed as an owner of one of those matching vans. I had undercover detectives go out and view that van, and that van had some very unique identifying marks on it, which exactly matched the van at the crime scene. I was very certain that this was the vehicle used in the murder of Doug Carlile.
While the evidence connecting Timothy Sukau to the crime scene is strong, it's not enough to charge him with Doug Carlile's murder.
We began diving into cell phone records. We began looking at towers. Timothy Sukau had left his cell phone at home because he didn't want to be tracked. He knew a little bit about how police worked. His driver got bored and turned his phone back on and was playing on the phone while he was waiting. So we were able to place the van and the driver at the scene for about 2 hours beforehand.
With the evidence now stacked against him, Timothy Sukau is arrested for the murder of Doug Carlile.
Not only do we have DNA linking this person there, we find no other reason for him to be in that area, and now we have our van that was used as the getaway van. So we start putting everything together and we bring him in.
On the night I arrested Mr. Sukau, he was in denial, refused to speak with me, and in fact, he fell asleep on the interview room table.
Back in basic homicide school, you learn that when someone's done a serious crime, they're constantly looking over their shoulder. They have trouble sleeping. They're waiting for the police to show up knocking at their door. So when you arrest someone and you tell them they're under arrest and you know they did it, all that pressure's off now. And it's not uncommon for suspects to fall asleep. And so we knew we had our guy.
I got a search warrant to access Tim's phone, and in that phone was James Henrikson's name. It says James, North Dakota, and it was James's phone number attached to it. So at that point, I knew that at least in some way, Tim Sukau knew James Henrikson directly.
About an hour after the murder, Timothy Sukau sent a text message to Robert Deleo saying, "Tell the boss to watch the news." This was obviously letting Henrikson know that he had carried out the murder.
At this point in the investigation, I've got an overwhelming amount of evidence that's pointing toward Mr. Deleo and Mr. Henrikson's involvement in Mr. Carlile's murder.
Detectives haul Robert Deleo into the station for questioning.
I told Mr. Deleo, you know the game. First to the table gets the best deal. And he was trying to beat Mr. Sukau to the table to provide information. Ultimately, Deleo admitted to brokering the murder of Doug Carlile for James Henrikson.
With the confession that James Henrikson was responsible for the hit on Doug Carlile, detectives are able to piece together his final 24 hours.
Timothy Sukau had been up at the house for a couple hours, waiting for the Carliles to return home. They'd been at a church function that began at about 5 o'clock. They drove home, parked their car probably about 6:55 in the evening.
They entered the residence. Alberta started up the stairs. When she heard voices in the house, so she came back downstairs to see who was there. She actually saw the shooter and saw him with a gun.
At 7:02, Timothy Sukau shot Doug Carlile 7 times and ran away. At 7:03 p.m., Alberta Carlile called 911, reporting that someone had just shot her husband.
Medics pronounced Doug dead at 7:18 in the evening.
Timothy Sukau then disposed of the murder weapon.
Timothy Sukau had driven out to the Spokane Valley, out to a bridge, and tossed the murder weapon into the river.
My biggest takeaway in this case is that Doug is not unlike a lot of investors who has this sort of modest demeanor or veneer, and he likes to take risks in financial games. And when they begin losing money, the stakes are even higher than I think Doug and a lot of these people initially guessed.
Robert Deleo pleads guilty to conspiracy and solicitation to commit murder and is sentenced to 22 years in prison.
Mr. Deleo is a sociopath who has no guilt feelings about anything he's done.
Timothy Sukau pleads guilty to murder and receives a sentence of 30 years.
He's gonna be like 80 years old if he ever sees daylight again. So basically it's a death sentence he got, so I think his sentence was fair, provided the information he gave and the help he gave to the case to get the actual person that I believe is responsible.
James Henrikson is found guilty of murder for hire and sentenced to life in prison.
James Henrikson, to me, very much presents like a classic quintessential psychopath. He starts out as a con man, wheeling and dealing, moving on to bigger scams, which eventually ends up into being a mastermind of a murder.
This was a case where we took down some real bad people. These weren't people that just lost their temper and killed someone. These were pre-planned murders. What this came down to was greed. James saw a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and he was willing to kill anyone who got between him and that money. And Doug Carlile was going to buy him out, and he wasn't going to get that money, so he had him killed. It was all about money, it was all about greed.
This case was the most complicated case that I've ever worked on. It meant a lot to the Carlile family that I was able to bring this case to resolution. I received phone calls from every son from Alberta thanking me. They're just good people who are appreciative that their dad got justice.
Doug Carlile was a truly innocent victim in this case, and the people involved are sitting in prison where they deserve to be.
This was something savage. It scared the community.
A brutal attack.
She had at least 10 fractured ribs, fractured larynx, bruises all over her body.
By posing her and making her look like some type of a sexual deviant, she is basically being humiliated after the end of her life.
A twisted tale with multiple suspects.
He is being so secretive, he's being so careful to cover his tracks.
Maybe they did have a sexual relationship. Maybe something went wrong. Or was it some unknown subject that we had in our community that enjoyed doing this?
Everybody is a suspect.
The truth will be revealed.
She was doing some online dating, and whoever killed her is in her computer, and that'll tell you all you need to know.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Deer Park, Washington, 20 miles north of Spokane. It's a nature lover's paradise.
It is full of fun things to do, both winter and summer. People come here to take their vacations. It's such a nice town. And so we feel lucky to live here.
It's not overly crowded. People know people still. Everyone knows their neighbor.
Deer Park is a quiet place, and it's not known for violent crimes. Maybe property crimes, some family disputes that we deal with.
But on a chilly December evening, the quiet safety of the town would be violently disturbed when police get a call from a distraught man looking for his ex-wife, Shannon Starbuck.
He asked for a deputy to respond to her house to do a welfare check. He explained to the deputy that it was totally uncommon for her to take off and be gone for periods of time. Responding deputies walked around the house, looked through the windows, looked for signs of forced entry. Is there some kind of foul play here? At the time, they did not have enough probable cause or reasonable suspicion to enter this residence without a warrant.
The next day, police get another call, this time from her panicked mother.
According to her mother, they spoke at 9 a.m. in the morning on a daily basis. And it had been 2 mornings that they had not spoken. And that prompted officers to respond again. They were able to obtain a key, and they made entry at that time and discovered the body.
Detectives Mike Ricketts and Lyle Johnston of the Spokane County Sheriff's Office rushed to the scene.
There was no signs of a break-in. I didn't see anything obvious within the living room. When I entered the master bedroom, here is this white female that's in her mid-30s or so, laying on the bed.
She was laying on her back, face up. She had bruising near her neck area and some bruising around her facial area. The bruising itself would indicate to me that she was beat. There were no knife wounds. There were no gun wounds. Considered a possibility that was suffocation or strangulation. There was a robe that was kind of awkwardly placed on her. There was a massage vibrator type of device that people would use to massage their muscles that was wrapped inside of that robe awkwardly. Not like she had done that. She was posed that way.
Detectives confirm the woman is 42-year-old Shannon Starbuck.
Shannon was a lovely, vivacious woman. She was married to a man named Clay, and they had recently become divorced.
Now, they had 5 children. 2 older boys lived with Clay, and the 3 younger, the 2 girls and the youngest son, lived with Shannon.
She was vibrant, she was beautiful, she was kind. She was also going back to school. That time, she was restarting her life.
Who would break into the home of a lovely woman, the mother of 5 children, and do such a horrible thing to her? This was something savage. It scared the community.
To catch her killer, detectives will need to piece together the last 24 hours of Shannon Starbuck's life. They start by processing the crime scene.
I didn't find any sign of a struggle inside the bedroom. We collected DNA swabs from her neck and under her fingernails. All of the blankets from the bed were inside the wash machine, which was just right outside the master bedroom door. And the front of the wash machine had been completely wiped down. and appears to be some type of cleanup of the crime scene to hide any potential evidence that may have been left on the bed by the suspect. At the foot of the bed is what appears to be a safe, and inside there are several sexual toys that are staged in a way so that they could be obviously seen from anyone who's walking past.
Detectives start working up a profile on Shannon's killer.
By posing her and making her look like some type of a sexual deviant, she is basically being humiliated after the end of her life. This would appear to be someone that has some type of a vendetta against Shannon to take this much time and effort to make her look this bad.
Is it somebody that was close to her, that knows her, that was angry with her, wanted to get back at her? Or was it some unknown subject that we had in our community that enjoyed doing this?
The first person detectives want to speak with is Shannon's ex-husband, Clay Starbuck.
Oftentimes in these type of investigations, we're going to look at the domestic partner or the ex.
The sad reality is these are the vast majority of the offenders who are taking the lives of women. It's not the stranger hiding behind the bush. It's not a serial killer. It's the people that have already been in their lives.
I met Clay and I said, "Hi, I'm Detective Dressbeck. I understand you have some questions." He said, "Yeah, I want to know what's going on. Nobody will tell me anything." I said, "You don't know what happened?" He said, "No, nobody will tell me anything." So I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but your wife was found dead in her bedroom." And he just collapsed on the floor. And it's prudent and appropriate as an investigator to give them room to react in whatever fashion they're gonna react. At one point, he even excused himself, went into the bathroom, and I could hear him heaving like he was throwing up. Like this was very traumatic to him.
After Clay gets over the shock of Shannon's death, detectives ask him when he last saw his ex-wife.
Clay Starbuck had told us that he had a small car that didn't run very well. So on the day in question, he starts the car up. He drives it around this community area where he lives in Deer Park. And it stalls approximately 2 to 3 blocks from Shannon Starbuck's house.
I was cranking and trying to start it. It didn't start. And I texted Shannon and said, you know, like, car quit, can you take the kids? And she texted me and said, okay. And so she took the kids to school. So I walk home.
He gets back to his house and then he goes to sleep because his back is hurting. And at that time, his phone must have died because the battery wasn't charged.
Clay says he went back to work on his car from 11:10 a.m. until 3:30 p.m., returning to his home a number of times during the day to get more tools.
2:45 p.m., the children were out of school and texted Shannon asking where she was, who's gonna pick me up.
Shannon was supposed to go to the school and pick up the children, and she doesn't arrive.
In the late afternoon, while his phone was dead, Clay says he missed a number of texts.
3:17 p.m., Shannon texted Clay asking if he could pick up the kids. And that was the last text from her phone that afternoon.
She says something like, I just got up, can you get the kids? But my phone wasn't on. And so Austin left work and picked up the kids.
Clay wasn't worried at that point because he thought he would see Shannon later that night.
There was a basketball game one of the oldest sons was playing in at the high school that evening. And Shannon usually would show up at those games, however, she wasn't there that night.
I sent Shannon a couple texts just saying, you know, get a hold of us.
After the basketball game, Clay and the kids went to Shannon's house.
We've walked around the house. I've walked around the house with the kids with a flashlight, looking in there Thursday night.
Okay.
And
And then what happened?
well, we went back to my house.
Okay.
And the kids kept trying to call Shannon, and I think I sent her another text. On Friday, I sent her a text and said, if we don't hear from you by 7 p.m. tonight, I'm gonna call and have the sheriff find you.
Detectives are now able to narrow down the window of time that Shannon was murdered.
Shannon's death probably occurred somewhere on December 1st after 3:17 p.m. and sometime before December 2nd around 9 a.m.
She had a routine of talking to her mother at a specific time in the morning, and that phone call doesn't come. So we begin to operate under the assumption that she was deceased by that particular time.
Investigators check Clay's cell phone records. It corroborates what he told investigators.
He was cooperative during the interview, and he provided a DNA sample voluntarily.
With his alibi having checked out, they ask Clay who he thinks might have wanted to hurt Shannon in such a brutal way.
The thing that he kept saying was, look at her computer, and that'll tell you all you need to know. He said she was doing some online dating, and whoever killed her is in there.
Who did they meet in person? Who did they ghost? Who may be motivated to come after them? Who was not who they said they were? I mean, online dating is the Wild West.
Detectives are working a theory that whoever murdered Shannon Starbuck could be connected to her online dating. They start by scouring her phone, looking for recent dates.
One of the first ones that came up was a guy by the name of Tom. And Tom had sent her some text messages that very day. Tom and Shannon had been flirting back and forth, and it was obvious that they're attracted to one another.
As they continue reading the texts, alarm bells sound.
Tom is encouraging Shannon to send him some kind of racy pictures, and one of the pictures that he asked for is very similar to the pose that we find Shannon's deceased body in.
Is this a coincidence? How is this possible?
That threw up red flags for us. We're thinking he is our suspect.
They track Tom down by calling the number on Shannon's phone.
When we first talked to Tom, we went to his residence. Tom told us he met Shannon through a dating application. They had met, they had communications on the phone and via text. They had not been intimate.
Detectives asked Tom to account for his whereabouts during the time they believe Shannon was murdered.
Tom Walker told us that he left from work approximately 9:40 a.m. to go to a funeral. And then he returned to work at around 10:50 a.m. He said that he had texted her about going to the funeral and asked her how her day was going. She subsequently responded to him a little while later, around 12, asking if he would like to meet her for lunch at that time. She thought it was odd because she knew that he had a funeral to attend to and that he would be at work and would not be able to meet on December 1st. We were able to investigate that and totally corroborate everything he told us. His boss eliminated him by verifying when he was at work, when he went to the funeral, when he came back, and how late he worked that evening. He was nowhere near Shannon's residence on December 1st. Tom also provided us with a DNA sample voluntarily. His DNA was not found on Shannon Starbuck in the place of the injuries.
So we were able to rule Tom out in the death of Shannon Starbuck,
Still believing Shannon's dating history is the key to finding her killer, detectives delve deeper into her personal life.
Similar to going to a bar, for instance, to meet people and not knowing them. Online, you're also potentially connecting with people you don't know. And there is some research to suggest that online dating behavior is associated with increased risk of violence.
So sometime shortly after noon, Shannon text messages the guy by the name of John and appears to be setting up some type of a rendezvous for later in the evening, on the same day as her death.
Detectives set to work finding John Wilson.
We were able to take the photograph off of John's Facebook account, run it through the open source search engine, and we were able to match that photograph with a doctor out of Maryland. Once we contacted that doctor, we were able to verify that that wasn't really a picture of John, and John is just an unknown person who's faking these profiles for the purposes of dating multiple women.
I think 50% of people or more report lying about their profiles or information online. So it begs the question, who are you talking to?
John's fake online presence leads detectives to theorize that he is somehow involved in Shannon's murder.
He's difficult to find, and he's already being untruthful about his identity. He seems to have disappeared into the wind the moment that Shannon Starbuck is murdered. So we thought, John is our guy, because he is being so secretive, he's being so careful to cover his tracks. We reached out to John directly. I sent him both an email and messaged him saying, you need to contact the police. So when John calls me, he is very skeptical. Sounds like he can't really believe the police are reaching out to him. But I inform him that I'm investigating the death of Shannon Starbuck. His first reaction was that he wanted to consult with an attorney.
When you see a suspect immediately lawyer up, as they say, and engage their attorney, it doesn't necessarily point to guilt, but it points to them having something to hide. No matter what the reason, that would automatically elevate them, in my experience, to someone who requires closer scrutiny.
Detectives ask for the man's real name, but he refuses to give it to them.
And at that time, I scribbled out a quick note saying, hey, tell him he's got 20 seconds, tell us who he is, identify himself, or we're gonna put his photograph out on the media everywhere to find out who he is.
It's called offering the out. And this is frequently where we see they'll cop to something that they wouldn't normally confess to because it's a preferred alternative to what's being insinuated.
At that point, John does give me his true identity, and we make an arrangement to meet the following day with his attorney.
Detectives finally come face to face with their prime suspect, John Kenline.
And so John did lay out the fact that he is married, he has a job that is kind of respected in the community, and yet he's leading this double lifestyle of meeting up with multiple women. And so he doesn't want this to be known. He feels that he's got a lot to lose, potentially his job, his marriage, his own children, his house. Everything is riding on the line. Yet at the same time, he realizes the predicament he's in. He's the #1 suspect in a homicide, so it all has to come out.
If somebody's willing to cheat or lie to their family, they're probably willing to lie to investigators.
Detectives ask John where he was during the time they believe Shannon was murdered.
He told us that he dropped his kids off at school that morning and that he had plans to see Shannon approximately 10:30 a.m. in Deer Park. He drove up to Shannon's house and there was no answer.
He admits that he's been there at the house, he's made phone calls on the day that she is murdered. Everything puts him in the area.
Detectives suspect John Kenline murdered Shannon after a date gone bad.
What crossed my mind was, Maybe they did meet up, and maybe they did have a sexual relationship. Maybe something went wrong. We suspected that John was our killer.
Detectives have zeroed in on John Kenline as the prime suspect in the murder of Shannon Starbuck.
John told us he drove up to Shannon's house, and there was no answer. So he utilized some public phones in the Deer Park area, and he tried to call her, still didn't get any answer. He actually drove back to her house, still no sign of Shannon, nobody answered the door. He also went around the house knocking on windows and that, there was still no answer.
After he left, Kenline claims he finally heard from Shannon. She texted saying she was out for lunch and was sorry she missed him.
So sometime shortly after noon, Shannon text messages John and appears to be setting up some type of a rendezvous for later in the evening, making plans for that night.
So John went back that evening and tried to meet up with her, and there was no answer.
Detectives are suspicious of John's story.
His own alibi put him at the house during that time frame when Shannon was murdered.
There could be a variety of motivations that John would have in showing up at her house. It could be that she was about to expose him for the charlatan and the fraud that he was. It could be that he felt she had ghosted him, and how dare she. It could be that he just wanted to take the relationship to the next level and then found when he was there that, in fact, his fantasies were more twisted maybe than even he knew.
There's just one problem.
At the time, John did provide us with a DNA sample, which we tested along with other samples, and he was eliminated as a contributor to DNA.
The fact John's DNA is ruled out doesn't necessarily mean he's not the killer. Every alibi should be independently corroborated through some secondary source.
John seems to be our number one suspect. He's just not admitting to having been in the house or having direct contact with her. We still had a lot of investigation to do before we could rule him out.
With John stonewalling them, the investigation hits a wall.
I think it did shock the people of Deer Park as well as the Spokane community. A mother of 5 children murdered inside her own home. No apparent signs of forced entry. Did she answer the door and someone forced her way in? That type of incident without answers scares people.
We had a very serious threat on the streets for the community at large. And that was very stressful for me at the time because I didn't want to miss anything. I wanted to make sure we covered all of our bases and that we were headed in the right direction.
But soon, their hard work pays off.
We always request records directly from the cell phone provider. And in this case, when I was able to get records for Shannon Starbuck's phone, I was able to go through them and I found a 911 call that was not listed in her call records on her phone. Some cell phones actually mask 911 calls, and that would be if you were a victim and you called 911, as soon as you hang up, the suspect wouldn't be able to grab your phone and see that you had called. So it's kind of a safety feature.
The discovery of the 911 call rocks the investigation.
And I can actually remember standing up at my desk and announcing to all the other detectives in the room, she called 911, and it was extremely exciting. We're working on the premise that Shannon died somewhere in a 24-hour time span. So looking at those phone records, it timestamps 9:17 in the morning as the time that this event is taking place. We're able to verify that with 911, and it was an oh my gosh moment of we really know when this happened now.
To me and to other investigators, that indicated that that was the time she was attacked.
911, what are you reporting?
And she was killed shortly thereafter.
Hello?
Obviously, this revelation is shocking, and the fact that investigators, in hearing this for the first time, I mean, this was under their noses all along. She was essentially in the throes of death.
Detectives have learned that Shannon Starbuck called 911 in distress in the early morning of December 1st, the day she was killed.
So we were unaware up until weeks into the investigation that she had ever called 911. But once we saw it in the phone records, I was able to contact the 911 dispatch center, have them pull the records for that specific date and time, and they found a recording that they didn't know existed.
911, what are you reporting?
When you listen to the recording, you can hear a grunt and a muffled noise in the background that sounds like someone possibly being assaulted.
911, what are you reporting? Hello?
It was eerie in the sense that you knew this is a struggle that's going on and this person's fighting for their life, and it doesn't turn out well. The 911 receiver actually talks at the exact same time that that noise is in the background.
911, what are you reporting?
And it would be my belief that he probably talked over it and didn't realize that there was anyone on the end. He did call the phone number immediately back, but there was no answer. It goes to voicemail because the phone has been shut off or disabled by this time.
Hi, this is Shannon. Please leave a message.
And therefore, there is no further contact.
Almost without exception, in every jurisdiction, 911 hang-up calls are at least a one-officer dispatch.
Would it necessarily have stopped what was occurring? Not likely, but maybe perhaps her killer could have been found much earlier.
The discovery of the 911 call sends the investigation into a whole new direction.
Initially, it appeared that Shannon was most likely alive in the afternoon of December 1st. She's texting to multiple people, both Tom, John, Clay at some point, and the kids as well.
Detectives now believe it was likely Shannon's killer, trying to pretend Shannon was still alive.
Your scope of possible suspects really starts to slim down because now you can check out their alibis and know whether or not it was possible for them to have been involved or not.
With the new evidence, detectives take another look at their prime suspect, John Kenline.
We discovered that at 9:20, he's taking the kids to school. So to me, that's pretty closely ruling John out as being involved in getting back and forth between those locations with the amount of time it would take to go from Spokane to Deer Park. I am now convinced John Kenline was not involved in the murder of Shannon Starbuck.
This is a case that would be and has been extraordinarily frustrating for investigators in that you have some pretty specific crime scene behaviors and a puzzling scene and a number of viable suspects, and nothing is shaking out. The unanswered questions are going to keep you up at night.
After ruling out John Kenline in the murder of Shannon Starbuck, detectives go back to the drawing board.
We're looking at saying, okay, somebody got on her phone and was communicating with John Kenline, was communicating with Tom Walker, was returning messages.
Detectives do a deeper dive into Shannon's personal life and make an alarming discovery.
While I'm talking to the friends of Shannon, they are informing me that Clay has been nothing but trouble for Shannon. He has harassed her, he has done damage to her place, he has done damage to her vehicle, he has threatened her.
He owes her a significant amount of child support. He's a very much controlling person. He's not happy with the fact that she's dating other men, that he has no control over her, and he has been stalking and harassing her for some time.
When it's learned that Clay has been stalking Shannon, it's particularly troubling to me as a psychologist. We know from the research in intimate partner homicides that when stalking is involved, it increases the risk 2 to 3 times that somebody is going to end up murdered.
We discovered she was so concerned about Clay stalking her, essentially, that she did ask for and receive a domestic violence protection order.
Tragically, the use of restraining orders like we see in this case, I mean, it's a piece of paper. The existence of that paper is actually seen by the offender as a voucher to actually act on what they've already been planning. It actually infuriates and escalates their behavior to the point that it has the opposite of the desired effect.
She had told individuals in the community that if something happened to her, if she was harmed or killed, that it was Clay Starbuck that had done it to her.
Based on these new revelations, detectives take a second look at Clay Starbuck.
So Clay had given us a story about his vehicle breaking down and how he had sent some text messages to Shannon to try to get her to take the children to school. And then after his car broke down, he went back to his house and fell asleep. Somewhere in there, he said that his cell phone battery died and his cell phone was off for a majority of the day. And that in itself wasn't contradictory to anything we found in the cell phone records. His phone was actually off for a majority of the day. But when we examine cell phone records frequently, we don't look at just a very small frequent time frame because people live and breathe on their cell phones in this day and age. You develop patterns. So for Clay Starbuck, over a 1-year total of cell phone records were obtained. And what we were able to see was that at no other time over the preceding year has his phone ever been off for the amount of time that it was off on the day that Shannon Starbuck was murdered. He had never in the prior year had text messages sent to him that he didn't respond to in a timely fashion, or go for periods of time where there was no activity. Yet on the day of Shannon Starbuck's murder, all of those things happened.
Detectives meet with Clay, testing his alibi against the new timeline.
We ask him to go for a little ride with us to show us the route that he drove and where his vehicle broke down and how he walked back to his house, which he agreed to do. Now, this is a golf course community, and there are actually greens in between some of these residences. And where the vehicle stalled is across from one of these greens that goes in between these houses and would have been the most likely direct route to walk back to his house. And in this particular December, there isn't a lot of snow. There wasn't anything really impeding someone from taking that route. But Clay insists that he walked down the sidewalk and stayed off of the golf green, at which point he turns and goes east through the neighborhood back to his own residence. We follow this route, and we specifically look for home security cameras, and we find one. We contact the homeowners and ask them if we can look at their security footage, and after looking at the footage numerous times, we cannot once find Clay Starbuck walking past this residence that he claims he walked past 4 times on that day. I questioned him on this at least 2 to 3 times. Are you sure this is the route you've taken? And he is adamant that that's the route he's taken. And now after looking at the footage from the surveillance video, it's obvious that Clay Starbuck isn't being truthful with us about where he was and what he was doing.
Detectives have now shifted the focus of their investigation in the murder of Shannon Starbuck to her ex-husband, Clay, when a surprising piece of evidence emerges.
DNA that was identified as belonging to male Starbuck lineage was found in the area where Shannon was strangled and suffocated. So it wasn't DNA just found on a ledge or an item of clothing or something that had been there for a while. This was DNA that was found on Shannon Starbuck, where she was injured, part of the cause of her death.
In order to link the killer's DNA left on Shannon's body to Clay, Detectives must prove it belongs to him and not one of his sons.
We were able to eliminate the adult male Starbuck children because one of them was at school during that day and the other one was at work. That left us with Clay Starbuck as being the provider of the DNA on Shannon Starbuck.
Closing in on their killer, detectives bring Clay Starbuck down to the station to confront him with the damning evidence.
Clay Starbuck agreed to be interviewed. He waived his rights, so we proceeded with a recorded interview with him.
Part of how we got here today, Clay, is the fact that all of the evidence has lined up to show that you have not been truthful with us to this point. All of the evidence is lined up to show that you were there at the house on that particular day that Shannon died.
Is that no? I can't hear you. No? No, don't sit here and tell me you weren't there, because we have the proof that you were there, okay?
No. I've been in that house probably 30 times.
Okay, it's not about the house.
It's not about the house, and
It's not about the house. How did your DNA get on her neck and her face and under her fingernails?
You see my DNA was there under her fingernails and around her mouth. I don't have any scratches or bruises. You guys looked at me for that. I didn't do that.
I said, I understand that, Clay, but let me go get something. I went and grabbed the lab report, and I showed it to him. This is the laboratory report that indicates your DNA is under her fingernails, was on her neck, and on her face.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just
Okay.
have a problem believing it.
your DNA is there because you murdered Shannon.
He started breathing heavy. He was almost hyperventilating.
I'm not doing very well right now.
You're not doing very well because you're under arrest for murder. I agree with you. You're not doing very well right now. At that point, he shut down. He didn't make any more statements.
Detectives arrest Clay Starbuck and charge him with the murder of his wife, Shannon.
Sadly, Shannon's fatal mistake was daring to start a new life without Clay. And it really drove him crazy. Clay killed Shannon, I think, because he was jealous and he did not want to have to pay her child support every month. And at the time of the murder, he owed her more than $9,000. And so it appears that Clay decided that he could get out of these financial problems by simply killing her.
Detectives now believe they know what happened to Shannon Starbuck in the last 24 hours of her life.
December 1st, around 8 a.m., Clay text messages Shannon, asks her to take the children to school. Most likely during the time frame that she's away from the house, taking the children to school, Clay has snuck into the house and he lays in wait for her while she is going about her morning routine.
While Clay is waiting for Shannon to return home, he turns off his cell phone.
Shortly after getting back to the house, he attacks her. She attempts to call 911, but that call is cut short.
911, what are you reporting?
And her phone is turned off. And then he murders her through a struggle, strangulation. He positions her in a humiliating fashion for the rest of the community to be aware of after the fact, and makes her look like the bad person because she's doing some online dating and things that he doesn't necessarily approve of.
After she was attacked, I believe Clay got on her phone and on her computer and started looking through it and communicating back with these individuals, trying to frame either Tom Walker or John Kenline as being the ones that committed the murder.
Clay then returns home, turns on his cell phone, and waits for his kids to get home from school.
Clearly, this festering jealousy had led him to the point where he was prepared to commit murder, but at the same time, he was able to keep things under control and keep his behavior premeditated and organized enough that he uses these texts to artificially engineer this alibi.
It's Thursday Shannon's day. Right? So I'm the guarantee. I'm the go-to guy on taking him to school. So, but Thursday, the car's dead. I'm getting that going back and forth. And at 3:30 on Thursday, she says something like, I just got up. Can you get the kids? But my phone wasn't on.
For me, I also wonder, is there an element of sadism here? Is there a deeper quality to him that really wants to have Shannon experience pain and suffering?
Clay Starbuck is found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Clay definitely planned this out. There was a significant amount of premeditation, and I think that someone that can be that calculating and that terrible to any other human being, spending the rest of his life in prison is definitely what he deserved.
It's horrendous, but not just because of what happened to Shannon. It's what it did to this family. When Clay Starbuck killed Shannon, he robbed their children of their mother, and then because of his life sentence, he robbed his children of a father. It was a selfish act based in greed and jealousy, and it just didn't have to happen.